Silent Hill 2, considered by many as one of the greatest works of art among the survival horror video games. Often cited as a landmark in horror gaming, the unconventional sequel paved the way for subsequent releases and has since developed a cult following among its fans.
Mama! Mama, I was looking for you! Now you're the only one left!
Although not one for horror games, Silent Hill 2 immediately caught my attention with its state-of-the-art graphics, captivating music, and to top it off, the game had one of the best storylines of all times. Team Silent truly created a gem of a game that needs to be experienced once in its full glory. And since Konami intends to relaunch this beloved franchise again, it seems only appropriate that we should try to unravel some of its mystery.
No, you're...
So sit back and relax as we try to find out why this game was and still is such a big deal even today. This was the opening of the game, James looking in the mirror, seemingly lost. And like many, I was awestruck by the visual fidelity of the game. The depth of field effect employed at the starting of the game was just beyond my comprehension for that time, although I very much appreciate it now that I know how big of an achievement it was for the console gaming. So, James arrives in Silent Hill after receiving a letter from his wife, Mary.
I got a letter. The name on the envelope said Mary.
The letter claims that she is waiting for him in their special place. The issue is, Mary has been dead for years.
A dead person can't write a letter. Mary died of that damn disease 3 years ago.
Now, if we look back at our opening mirror scene, we can see that while looking at his reflection, James was actually questioning his sanity. Would a sane person be looking for a dead person in a god-forsaken town like this? This is the first instance where the game messes with our minds. Even after the undeniable fact that Mary is dead, James still holds out a desperate hope that somehow the contents of the letter are true and he will meet his wife again. This opening manages to create an environment of discomfort and airiness which wasn't present in the first game, where the first game sets more of a dark tone with its CG intro, giving you nothing but visuals and the most vague of information, while this game gives you all the information you need to begin, but leaves you feeling like something is just off. Things don't add up, and the main character knows this but does not question it. Hell of a way to start a video game if you ask me.
I was friends with Mary.
You liar! Laura,
SH-2 employs the same atmosphere of psychological horror as the first Silent Hill game. It includes the abandoned and decomposed look of the town and the persistent fog obscuring the streets. But this time, Konami's flagship survival horror series delves into the deepest, darkest corners of human psyche. The town of Silent Hill itself acts as a mirror, reflecting the inner struggles and fears of the characters. It sets a precedence for how psychological elements can be weaved into the horror genre to create a more profound and unsettling experience. The story touches on some mature and controversial subjects which were largely unheard of around 2001, pushing the bar for survival horror as well as storytelling and art direction in video games. For example, James and Mary's story covers grief, relationship issues, fatal illnesses, and euthanasia. Angela's story has elements of alcoholism, sexual and physical abuse, domestic violence, incest, suicide, and trauma. Eddie's story focuses on bullying and fat shaming. Some of the more universal themes include murder, revenge, loneliness, pain, suffering, existentialism, guilt, death, depression, mental illness, and mental health. And yes, we are still talking about a video game, and that too from the 2000s era. The game was created by Team Silent, a production group within Konami Computer Entertainment Tokyo, and to everyone's surprise, the game's story did not follow up on the success of Silent Hill 1, and rather, the team chose to tell a completely fresh tale. Development began in June 1999, directly after the completion of its predecessor. As the developers already had a rough sense of the game's environment, they focused on its plot first. After the surprise success of the first game, SH-2 now had a significant upgrade in both budget and creative freedom for its development. The story was conceived by CGI director Takayoshi Sato, who took inspiration from a Russian novel, Crime and Punishment. The main writing was done by Hiroyuki Owaku and Sato.
James?
There's something special about these old games. There's a feeling of achievement in trying to figure stuff out on your own with little to no hand-holding. SH-2 is almost identical to the first game, but this time, players were presented with an option to change the controls. Very early in the game, James will get his two trusted companions, a radio and a flashlight. The radio James receives emits static noise when enemies are nearby, allowing him to detect them even through the thick fog or darkness. And since most of the game's environment is dark, flashlight is necessary as it is your only source of light. Much of the gameplay consists of navigating the town and finding keys or other items to bypass doors and obstructions, with less focus on killing enemies. Occasionally puzzles will be presented, often with riddles for the player to solve. One major game choice that the developers went with was that the game does not include heads-up display, and to check James's health, location and items, the player must pause the game to review the status. Right from the beginning of the game, James will come across maps like these for him to collect, which he can read only when there's a light source around. James will also periodically update the maps to reflect locked doors, clues and obstructions for future reference. Silent Hill 2 was not completely without a tutorial though. Players were eased into the game gently. From opening intro to your first fight, there's fair amount of running which gives time to the player to get used to the control scheme of the game. Then initial encounters with the monsters are in vast open spaces, so game further gives a choice of whether to fight or just mind your own business. And later on, when James enters the woodside apartment, players are taught to use weapons in tight spaces so that by the time we reach the more difficult sections of the game, player is fully accustomed to the controls. SH-2 also gives you subtle hints. James will look into the direction of anything that is important. This served the purpose of guiding the player without having to resort to waypoints. The story of the game is linear and the way of the player is blocked by obstacles so as to guide them towards the desired direction. Some of the game's puzzles can be a little troublesome, but it is highly recommended that you should try to solve these without any external help first. This game comes from the golden days of gaming when players were encouraged to think on their own, and an era where information was not so easily accessible. Although Silent Hill 2 is considered as a masterpiece, it wasn't a perfect game and had its shortcomings. One of the complaints that people attribute to this game is that even if one chooses to play the game on harder difficulties, there is never any shortage of ammo, which makes the gameplay rather easier. Now this complaint is rather personal of mine. At times I feel as if the game acts as a door opening simulator. Most of the doors that you will come across in the game will be closed or will be of no use. Game employs a fixed camera system as a gameplay mechanic, which can sometimes come in the way. Further, James cannot aim manually, and as such we are forced to rely on the game's auto-aim system, which sometimes can be a little frustrating when it does not come off correctly. Well, no game is perfect, and these were the best possible design choices that the devs could come up with for the time. It was an artistic choice as they did not want the game to be a Resident Evil clone. Game developers managed to make the game genuinely scary without having to resort to jump scares, which speaks volumes about the game design. Game has a compelling story that is filled with psychological and atmospheric horrors. It's an experience of the Silent Hill through the eyes of James Sunderland and his selective memory loss.
You! It was you, wasn't it?
I'm here for you, James.
Masahiro Ito, art director of Silent Hill 2, also mentioned in an interview he did not believe that James's story arc required that many monsters as Alessa Gillespie. Another criticism that this game gets is that the voice acting sounds off or is just bad.
No, it's okay. I didn't mean to scare you. I'm kind of lost.
Lost?
But if one looks closely, it seems to just fit the narrative and the atmosphere of the game perfectly. If story is the heart of the game, then music can be called its soul. SH-2 is famous for having one of the best soundtracks in the series. Akira Yamaoka, music composer of the game, brought a new kind of horror to the video games, something that was unheard of. Yamaoka composed the iconic music of Silent Hill 2 at his home, and it took him 3 days to write the music for Theme of Laura, Silent Hill 2's main theme, by combining a sad melody and a strong beat. Along with soundtrack, Yamaoka also produced most of the game's sound effect. To prevent repetition, he created hundreds of footstep sounds for the characters. In his own admission, it was important to break some of the rules of sound in a survival horror game previously set by Capcom's Resident Evil game series. Silent Hill 2 makes extensive use of sound effects ranging from weird screams to footsteps on broken glass. Yamaoka wanted to surprise the player with different sounds and create an unsettling environment. He also incorporated occasional silence, commenting that selective moments of silence is another way of producing sound. His soundtrack gives Silent Hill 2 an edge that helps make it so memorable. Graphically, game is nothing short of a technical marvel. Team Silent wanted to create a realistic town, and for that, real images of places were used so as to make them look believable. The fog effect prevalent in the first game was a necessity due to the limitations of earlier PS1 console. However, there were no such limitations present with the PS2. Rather, game designers deliberately went with the fog so as to make the game's atmosphere look even more mysterious. Silent Hill 2 is also the very first game to include what appears to be the real-time shadows in-game. With the new game console's power, developers were able to replicate the soft shadow effects, which were leaps and bounds ahead of its time, and which the later ports of the game struggled to implement correctly. Now, before we proceed further, be warned that this video will contain major spoilers ahead. So if you haven't played the game, you may skip to the timecode displayed on screen. So before we delve further into the game's story, it is imperative that we understand the importance of the town. Silent Hill. Why this town of Silent Hill is so special, and what is Otherworld? The Otherworld phenomena is a paranormal state where the line between dream and reality has been blurred, causing elements of a person's subconsciousness to manifest into physical form. While SH-1 was about the psychic girl Alessa and her nightmare being projected on the town via her abilities, in Silent Hill 2, the spiritual power of the town has been corrupted by what happened in the first game, to the point that specific people are now experiencing their own individual otherworlds. Thus, the experiences and monsters that James went through in Silent Hill 2 are specific to him and his psyche. And not everyone who enters the town sees them. Now, initially I thought that the town attracts specific kind of people with deep-rooted guilt and then punishes them for their sins. However, that is far from the truth. The town of Silent Hill does not punish people for their sins or call people up to help them through their trauma. It only manifests what is already in a person's mind. So now that is out of the way, let's come back to our story. So James continues his journey to the town and reaches a cemetery where he meets Angela, who is looking for her mother in a cemetery of all places. Angela warns James that town is dangerous and he should stay away from it.
Yes?
I think you'd better stay away.
Yet, James continues to move forward. This conversation gives out a very uneasy vibe and a subtle warning that something is definitely not right in this town.
With it. It's kind of hard to explain, but...
Is it dangerous? It's just... I guess I really don't care if it's dangerous or not. I'm going to town either way.
When James finally reaches Silent Hill, he discovers that it is not the same beautiful town it was a few years ago. In addition to the bizarre, omnipresent fog, the whole town seems to be rotting away and abandoned, and strange, vague humanoid creatures are roaming the streets. After some running around, James enters Woodside apartment. This is where he meets a young girl who kind of acts as a brat and steps on his hand before running away.
Hey, wait! Damn it.
And soon after that, we get to witness this guy. A humanoid monster whose head is covered with a giant VLC player. I mean a metal triangle-shaped helmet. Masahiro Ito, the designer of Silent Hill 2's monsters, created Pyramid Head because he wanted a monster with a hidden face that would appear inhuman and disturbing. In one of the rooms we meet Eddie Dombrowski, another runaway seeking refuge in this mysterious town.
He was like this when I got here.
My name's James. James Sunderland.
Eddie.
After chatting with Eddie, we see Angela again. She's lying in front of a mirror with a knife in her hand, seemingly contemplating suicide.
I don't know what you're planning, but there's always another way.
Really?
James persuades her to hand him the knife for her own safety.
You're the same as me. It's easier just to run.
Outside the building, James finds Laura sitting on a wall humming to herself.
You! It was you, wasn't it? You're the one who stepped on my hand.
I don't know. Maybe I did.
James confronts her in frustration and she reveals that she knew Mary and then jumps off to the other side of the wall. So, our protagonist goes to another special place of theirs, Rosewater Park. This is where he meets Maria, who appears identical to James's dead wife.
Maria. I don't look like a ghost, do I?
As Maria is frightened by the monsters, she decides to accompany James in his attempt to reach his second special place.
Ha! You're just a gutless fatso.
What'd you have to say that for?
But before that, James enters Pete's Bolorama and meets Eddie again,
I just ran 'cause I was
who is with the same little girl. The girl runs away after spotting James.
Bye-bye.
Eddie then reveals to James that her name is Laura.
Eddie, let's go after her.
Huh? Laura? But why?
When James comes outside, Maria claims that she spotted Laura and entering the Brookhaven hospital, so they both follow her. While at the hospital, James and Maria are chased by Pyramid Head, who kills Maria, leaving James distraught. James resolves to search the hotel that he and Mary stayed at during their vacation. Later on, he rescues Angela from a monster. After which she reveals that her father had abused her as a child, and if we pay attention to a nearby newspaper clipping, it implies that she killed her father before coming to Silent Hill. Angela confronts James about his wife, accusing him of not loving her.
Yes. She was ill.
Liar!
On the way, he is surprised to find Maria alive and unharmed in a locked room.
You're alive! Maria! I thought that thing killed you! Are you hurt bad?
Not at all, silly.
She claims ignorance of their previous encounter and begins discussing elements of James and Mary's past that only Mary would know. So James sets off to find a way to free Maria, but returns to find her dead. James also confronts Eddie, who admits to maiming a bully and killing a dog before fleeing to Silent Hill. Somehow, James ends up offending Eddie.
Eddie, have you gone nuts?
I knew it. You too. You're just like him, James.
Eddie then attacks James, forcing him to retaliate and kill him in
I didn't
self-defense.
mean anything.
Don't bother. I understand. You've been laughing at me all along, haven't you? Ever since we first met. I'll kill you, James.
Finally, James reaches the hotel, where he locates a videotape that depicts him killing his dying wife by smothering her with a pillow. This scene right here summarizes how Silent Hill manages to evoke so many emotions out of the player. When James finally finds out what he has done, the game does not hand out controls to the player outrightly. Rather, James remains seated with somber music playing. This is further augmented by subtle camera movements that highlight James's realization of the truth. In another room, a final meeting in a burning staircase with Angela sees her giving up on life, unable to cope with her trauma. She thanks James for saving her but wishes that he didn't, as she feels she deserved whatever happened to her.
It's hot as hell in here.
You see it too. For me, it's always like this.
Afterwards, James encounters two pyramid heads along with Maria, who is killed once again. Finally, James comes to realize that Pyramid Head was created because he needed someone to punish him, and all the monsters are manifestations of his psyche.
Needed someone to punish me for my sins. But that's all over now. I know the truth. Now it's time to end this.
And the envelope from Mary disappears and both Pyramid Heads commit suicide. James heads to the hotel's rooftop, and depending upon the choices made by the player throughout the game, he encounters either a manifestation of Mary or Maria disguised as her.
It's time to end this nightmare.
No! I won't let you! You deserve to die too, James!
Silent Hill 2 was way ahead of its time. Some of the themes of the narrative are grief, guilt, and punishment. Other noticeable themes in the game are mental illness, lust, love, and abuse, including an exploration of how it affects people. A prominent focus of analysis is the symbolism of the monsters present in the game, which seems to be manifested from James's guilty consciousness. One major example of this manifestation of guilt is the Pyramid Head, who wields a large blade titled the Great Knife that it heaves across the floor in almost all player encounters. Its design not only serves to psychologically frighten the player, but it is also emblematic of many of the themes related to the narrative, as it represents the guilt that James experienced and the retribution he seeks for his actions. Another example of game's psychological horror is the letter from Mary that James receives in the beginning of the game. The letter gradually disappears during the game, hinting that the letter was not real and merely another part of James's hallucinations. The implication is that as James slowly began to understand what he had done, the illusions of the town begin to disappear. This explains the transformation of the hotel, as when James enters the hotel, it is mostly intact, but after he finds out the truth, the hotel reverts to its true form, a mostly burnt out structure. Another acknowledged attempt to induce a psychological influence in the game includes placing Mary's dress in the room where James discovered the flashlight and modeling at least two corpses in the town after James. The further we explore the town, the more otherworldly and completely unnatural it becomes. Words scratched along the walls that earlier on just seemed like random graffiti become messages that directly address James by name. In later parts of the game, James falls through holes in the ground far deeper than it should be humanly possible, unharmed. This comes just as you're starting to delve into the truth of what's going on in James's mind. Further, the town has not been completely abandoned by people, and when you do meet them, in true Silent Hill fashion, conversations are scarce and cryptic. Questions are answered with vague replies that tend to provide little to no clarity to the player.
Aren't you Maria?
I'm not your Mary.
So, you're Maria?
I am. If you want me to be.
Laura, along with Pyramid Head, acts as a driving force behind James's quest. Laura is the symbol of innocence, while Pyramid Head is the symbol of guilt. James is chasing after innocence, wanting it and searching for it, while he is running away from his guilt. Silent Hill 2 was fundamentally designed around pure psychological horror. Team Silent took a lot of time studying the human psyche and coming up with the ways to really shake people to their core. This game creates such an unsettling fine line between reality and completely unreal that you always feel this sense of unnerving uncertainty. Just like that, without any warning, game starts. It does not warn you of the things to come. The emotional toll it will have on you by the time you finish it.
You killer! Why'd you do it? I hate you! I want her back! Give her back to me! I knew it! You didn't!
It truly is a masterpiece, worthy of all the praise it can get.
I hate you! He was always waiting for you. Why? Why?
Like lot of games, Silent Hill 2 also has multiple endings, but game does not give you any hints. SH-2 judges you based on your actual unguarded behavior. The game is silently taking notes of how you actually play the game. You get different endings based on a variety of factors. These are not points in the game with obvious gameplay benefits. You are never told that these actions will have consequences. These are obtuse but insightful observations that actually say something about who you are and how you put yourself into the shoes of the game's main character. Every ending is quite different and manages to say something about both James and the player. Silent Hill mastered player choice before most people even realized it was a thing. The actual physical environments comment on the mental state of the protagonist, feeding information to the player without the need of dialogue or exposition. The plot is subtle, yet the player can piece together the narrative if they pay attention. So if you're interested in playing the game in its original glory, then PS2 version is the most reliable, truest version of it. The next best version of the game is the PC version, especially Silent Hill 2 Enhanced Edition, a fan-made mod project that has served as a far better remaster than the HD collections. Now that Konami intends to re-release this beloved franchise again, and given the terrible record Konami has with SH-2's remakes or any remakes these days in general, it seems highly unlikely that the new game would be able to do justice to this beloved masterpiece. I am ever so hopeful, but I fear we may never get something like this again. It truly is one of a kind game, a true work of art. Thanks for watching.